Hello everyone, today's questions are asking about how the grandiosity, the sense of superiority and entitlement tends to be more internalized whenever it comes to covert narcissism. Now generally, narcissistic people have this sense of self-importance and superiority, and it often manifests in grandiose behaviours that seek admiration and attention, and often while disregarding or minimizing others. Now, a grandiose narcissist might exaggerate their skills or their achievements to try to project an image of being exceptional, even when it's unrealistic. And due to their sense of entitlement, they can make self-serving decisions that prioritize their own needs, even their own whims, often while ignoring, even disregarding the needs of others. But one way or another, the grandiosity, the bragging, it's often displayed openly for everyone to see. But with covert narcissism, we do see the same sense of superiority and entitlement. However, it's internalized rather than displayed openly through things like bragging. Now, what I mean is they still believe that they're special, superior and unique. It's just that no one sees it, no one understands them, they're unappreciated. And this is often where you see low mood, anxiety, shyness, sometimes even resentment. Because no one sees them the way they see themselves, or treat them in the way they believe they should be treated. But the internalization serves like a defense mechanism to shield a very fragile self-esteem from perceived external threats. Because unlike a grandiose narcissist where we see a resistance to anything they might perceive as criticism, with covert narcissism there is a heightened sensitivity to criticism. It's crushing for them. So the internalization protects them from things like rejection or exposure of their own underlying insecurities and vulnerabilities, any kind of flaw that others might point out. Like commonly, it comes from early childhood experiences. They might have had conditional love from their parents, they have unmet emotional needs, there are chronic feelings of unworthiness. And this can create an unstable self-concept that is prone to both hypersensitivity and emotional dysregulation. For instance, when validation is withheld or maybe they're challenged somehow, emotions like shame, envy or embarrassment can quickly escalate into unmanaged distress, and this can manifest in anxiety, low mood, depression or aggressive outbursts. But unlike overt narcissists who seek their validation through maybe bragging about their achievements or their dominance, covert narcissists suppress these traits to avoid vulnerability. They fear being told no, being disagreed with, or maybe even being exposed. But that sense of superiority, entitlement and grandiosity is still there. It just manifests in a more subtle, often private and under the radar kind of way. And it's done while they portray a facade of humility, shyness or victimhood. And commonly what you see can be swings between hidden superiority and overt vulnerability. For instance, they might claim to be very caring and very empathetic towards others, and yet they feign confusion over the impact of their self-serving actions on other people. Publicly, they care about everybody in the world. At home, behind closed doors, they're just self-absorbed and selfish. But this swing can help them to regulate their intense needs for affirmation while often masking deep-seated shame and envy. Also with covert narcissism, we see fantasies of being exceptional, but they often present themselves as being overlooked, misunderstood, or cheated somehow. In some cases, they might even present themselves as vulnerable or inferior, which leads to an inconsistency between their self-concept and how they want others to perceive them. And this can be driven by their fear of ridicule, the fear of other people's reactions, the need for compassion and sympathy, or the need for reassurance. And they need others to collude with and validate them. They derive a sense of superiority indirectly, rather than through in-your-face bragging. So some of the common ways that grandiosity can manifest in covert narcissists can be first of all through a sense of martyrdom. By emphasizing their unappreciated sacrifices, their personal hardships, they seek attention, they seek pity, and this reinforces their internalized belief in being misunderstood and uniquely special. As I mentioned a moment ago, there is also their sense of vulnerability. For instance, they might demand special treatment due to some exaggerated issue that excuses them from personal responsibility. But in both cases, they seek attention and special treatment by leading others to believe that they are being helpful and supportive. They feed off other people's goodwill. But we often see a sense of victimhood in their exaggerated reactions to sometimes even perceived slights. We often see anger, sarcasm, emotional withdrawal, even outrage. And their reaction to that perceived slight is seen as evidence of their superior sensitivity. Others don't understand them or don't appreciate them. They are the ones who are being bullied. But we also see double standards, because other people's reactions to their self-serving behaviour is often seen as evidence of how badly that they are being treated. And they can be relentless in those exaggerated reactions until the other person eventually backs down. It's like they never do anything wrong until they do. And then they get very upset until, miraculously, they didn't do anything wrong again. And also with that sense of victimhood, a covert narcissist might demand special treatment. Narcissists generally like to be exempt from the same rules and conditions that others are held to, and this can be incredibly unfair to those who genuinely do need help and support in certain areas. Secondly, like pretty much all narcissists, they only really feel good about themselves if they're feeling better than others. So to bolster their low self-esteem, they can judge people, they can mock people, they'll gossip about them behind their backs. They feel powerful if they can get others to laugh at someone else's expense. They want others to collude with their belief that someone maybe only succeeded at something because they cheated, or that they don't deserve that success because of maybe something innocuous they said about 10 years ago. Other ways they try to belittle others is through sarcasm and unkind humour, but it is often disguised as playful banter. Now, a good sign that this isn't just playful banter is they can dish out those insults, they can make those jokes, but remember the sensitivity to criticism. They can't take them. The banter isn't allowed to be reciprocated. Now, another tactic could be feigned forgetfulness about maybe important information, or pretending they don't understand why something is important to others. And this kind of behaviour gives them control without being openly seen to be sabotaging anyone. Which leads me on to number 3, and that is intentional underperformance, or more commonly referred to as weaponized incompetence. But this is usually done while they're trying to show a humble exterior. Which again, this allows them to sabotage others. They get to feel powerful, but without any overt risk. Now, an example could be maybe having a task to do at work, something which is their actual job, but they don't really want to do it, so they find another task that they believe is much more worthy of their attention. But when they're called out for doing something else and not what they're actually paid to do, well, they might claim that they're being bullied. In some cases, they might make a deliberate half-assed attempt at something in the hope that someone else will take over. Like I said earlier, they like to exploit and feed off other people's goodwill. Next, there can be a permanent sense of being stuck. In their relationships, there can be ever-shifting standards which will never be reached by those around them. Nothing their loved ones do is ever enough. Because even if the partner, the kids, or whoever it is does please them somehow, it tends to be short-lived. There are always new issues, new standards to reach, new problems, and they can all arise at a moment's notice, because every solution will always have a problem. Just like there will always be something to ruin a nice memory. For instance, they had a wonderful night out, but they have a terrible headache. The meal in that restaurant was delicious, but they have a sore stomach. Now, this works in the sense that it prevents others from getting too close emotionally, or maybe expecting any kind of appreciation from them. And by constantly being in a state of disappointment and dissatisfaction, it protects them from having to reciprocate or maybe even just deliver on their promises. But it also gives them a sense of power and control. They feel special, especially when others keep trying to please them. Number 5 are hidden delusions of being exceptional. They might believe that they're morally pure, they just don't like to brag. They're very insightful, it's just that no one listens to them. Or they're a hidden genius, they're just misunderstood. Now, a covert narcissist might avoid public expression of these beliefs due to their fear of rejection or maybe being exposed somehow. But those beliefs are still there. And due to their hypersensitivity to criticism, what we often see is exaggerated defensiveness. There's anger, outrage, anxiety, and low mood and depression when others aren't seeing them the way they expect to be seen. Next is being cryptic. Now, rather than just ask for something, they might drop a lot of hints to try to evoke people's sympathy and their good nature. Now, this saves them from the risk of being turned down, but also if someone does step in to help, well, they're not actually beholden in any way because they didn't actually ask for anything. I've heard recently the term for this is dry begging, and I made a video on that previously if you want to check that out for more information. But another way they can be cryptic is by making vague, ambiguous statements that evoke emotions in others. For instance, they might say something random like, "People only pretend to be your friend," or "I'm just too trusting." And people have to ask what's wrong or what does that mean, but they only get further vague answers. They'll say just enough to trigger people's interest or their compassion, to keep them hooked, but it's like they're leaving a series of clues for them to work out. They're drip feeding them information just to keep them in a state of curiosity and concern. And this works for them in the sense that the more people ask questions, the more concern they're showing, the more they feel people care, and the more they're getting attention. And lastly, there is viewing others as extensions of themselves, now whether that's their kids, their friends, their parents, siblings, even their cult leader. But they get a sense of superiority through being associated with that person. They might claim their kids are very clever and successful, but it is due entirely to their sacrifice and their influence. Other people have succeeded, but it was only due to their support and their encouragement. When the whole time, in reality, those closest to them see someone who devalues and even sabotages others, someone who is envious, resentful, and lives in a state of constant unfulfillment. And it's not just that they want to live in a state of unfulfillment, they want everyone else to as well. So there are just a few ways the grandiosity can show in covert narcissists. Rather than in-your-face bragging, grandiose behaviour and so on, it is still there. It's just more under the radar and more manipulative. Now, as always, there are many more examples I could have added, so please feel free to use the comment section to add any I may have missed. There are some interesting conversations start from these videos. But if you find this topic to be interesting, please consider subscribing to my channel, and until next time, thanks for watching.